All right, welcome. You're tuning into Craig Cast, the best in Web3, blockchain, NFT, and cryptocurrency technology. Great reviews and incredible interviews with some of the leading people in Web3 and emerging tech. I'm your host, Craig O. Want to welcome in a special guest today, Mr. Scott Melker, the Wolf of All Streets. How are you, Scott?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. So much to talk about on a, as you put it, the Macro Monday. I maybe just want to start off on this $2,000 possibly being given out to 130 million U.S. residents, minus those that have an excessive income. Not sure what that threshold is.
$12. I don't know. No idea.
Wouldn't that be great? But what, in all seriousness, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is it just, it gets people excited. I average it out and I figure if I spend $150 for groceries a week, I've got 13 approximate weeks to feed my family if that's money that I need, if I just allocate it for that. But I think when $2,000 comes into to people who need it, you're going to see, spending very quickly. That $2,000 will be gone within minutes or hours.
Yeah, on Trump token and meme stocks and Polymarket and sports betting. People won't spend it on groceries. They'll do exactly what they did in the COVID days, and they'll go YOLO into some stupid investment, and markets will probably pump, but it's not going to happen. So I don't know why it's worth even discussing deeply. I think that it's a promise to get midterms ramping up after seeing a bunch of Democrats win at the end of last week in a bunch of key elections. And we know that they need to keep the economy roaring and keep people happy, in advance of the midterms. That's a year away. So I think that this will probably be tabled until closer if it does happen. Even Bissett walked it back and basically said, yeah, it's $2,000, but that comes with your no tax on tips and your tax breaks and such. So it's not really a check. We're just saying we're saving you $2,000, right? I think this is just one of those wildly populist things that you can say to try to drum up a little more of a favorability rating for your party.
Now, you, before coming into crypto, and I want you to explain how the name, the Wolf of All Streets, came in. But DJs, as you were a DJ back when your kid was born, you went to South by Southwest. Then you were hearing about all this Bitcoin talk and a lot of DJs, and I'm assuming a lot of them probably are retired, being like, yeah, I'll go spin the wheels if I feel like it, or I don't need to. Tell me a little bit about the backstory of how you got started in this space.
I mean, I started buying stocks when I was 13 years old, and I was always interested in markets. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, which used to be something I was proud of, in the late 90s. Now I wouldn't send my kids there for $1 million, but, in the late 90s, and, I was an anthropology major, but I took a hell of a lot of classes at Wharton, and all of my friends ended up going, onto Wall Street, private equity, consulting, and hedge funds. So obviously the group chats were always buy this stock, buy that stock. I always superficially traded, generally badly. I mean, I went broke 3 or 4 times over those years trying to trade markets. But eventually, I found crypto. If there's one thing that DJs have, it's a lot of free time during the day. So I was trading crypto in the early days, right when I was sort of transitioning out of DJing. I basically retired already. I was looking something to do, but all my friends were flipping ICOs. Basically, it was like, you buy Bitcoin, you send it to Bittrex, you use your Bitcoin to buy Ethereum and Ripple, but they called it Ripples because nobody knew what the hell we were trading back then. And all of a sudden, your $3,000 was $10,000, was $20,000 because it was late 2016, early 2017 with impeccable timing. And so I just sort of fell in love with it because of the timing, really. And honestly, it wasn't until the bear market when I had to mentally do the gymnastics to justify participating in it that I actually fell down the rabbit hole of why it matters.
No, I love it. And by the way, if I'm correct, your first stock that your dad gave to, I think was at 13, was Disney. Is that correct?
It was Disney and Caterpillar because I thought Mickey Mouse and tractors were cool. Yeah, and so that's basically how I got into markets. That's right. You've done your research.
Yeah, a little bit. Is the 4-year cycle done? Are we coming into 5 years? I mean, are we at a redefining moment, I guess, is sort of the broader question.
I actually had a long conversation with Benjamin Cowan into the cryptoverse, and he showed me, which is something I wasn't so aware of on a chart, how through all the early days of markets and even into the 80s and 90s, the S&P was always effectively on a 4-year cycle. If you take a look, you can see the peaks and valleys of the charts, and they align with where we are basically in the 4-year cycles for crypto. So when you kind of align the halving, which is a great narrative, but obviously doesn't matter now, it's a rounding error for supply and demand. When you line that up with global liquidity cycles and when people need to refinance thing, and I mean, 7 months after the halving is usually the presidential election, all those things I think play much more into the sort of myth of the 4-year cycle. At this point, listen, a lot of people are expecting certain things to happen based on what's happened in the past. And I think if you're being intellectually honest with what's happened over the past year, it just has not tracked previous cycles. And that narrative is dead. Like, do I think it'll be a 5 or 6-year cycle? I know that we will have bull and bear markets. I just don't think they'll be driven by the usual timing that we've seen in past markets. I think, they will align more with probably what happens with the macro as it becomes a more institutional asset class. But yeah, so I think the 4-year cycle is somewhat dead, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
And debasement of the dollar, how does that correlate with gold and silver and Bitcoin? What's that relationship look like from your end right now?
I think the dollar is going to debasement, which is the problem, right?
Debasement.
So we've been talking about debasement trade as Bitcoiners since I got into it in 2016, and I was new, right? It was the 2010 and 11 guys that were telling me about the debasement trade and that Bitcoin was a hedge against inevitable money printing and the purposeful debasement of the dollar by the United States government, which I think is very clear is the goal. I mean, that's obviously the way that you can inflate assets and keep people happy, and just the nature of being the global reserve currency. So what's interesting is seeing the debasement trade become a very mainstream narrative from some of the largest institutions and players on the planet, right? You got Paul Tudor Jones and Ken Griffin of Citadel and JP Morgan writing a report on it. It's crazy that they're finally admitting it, I think, across that level. But what's even crazier is that every single one of them has said buy Bitcoin as a result, like including JP Morgan and Citadel and all of these, right? Some say Bitcoin, gold, silver. Some say Bitcoin and gold. Paul Tudor Jones said Bitcoin, gold, and tech stocks, the NASDAQ, right? Everybody has a different solution, but every single one of them included Bitcoin. So if you're really attached to the idea that Bitcoin is correlated to tech stocks or that correlated to gold or any of those, it's very hard to make that case when we have such mixed narratives. I've always thought it was sort of an injustice to compare Bitcoin's price action to either. I think there's times when it trades like a stock, and there's times when it trades like gold, and there's times when it trades completely unrelated. To me, that's the definition of uncorrelated, right? It's a random walk in the park. Sometimes it's going in the direction of one and sometime in the other. So even the digital gold narrative I hate, because I love the digital gold narrative as the properties of Bitcoin. It's a better version of gold, but people conflate that with the price action. And then if gold goes up and Bitcoin doesn't, they say, so you were wrong. It's not digital gold, right? They don't need to like go up and down the same for it to be a superior store of value than gold over the long term, or better money, or more portable, or more divisible, or any of those things that make it a better version. So I really think that Bitcoin is the holy grail of a portfolio, even if you don't believe that it's superior money or that, it's going to become the global reserve currency. The fact that it's largely uncorrelated mathematically, and even if you just take a deep look at the charts over time from either, means that it's the holy grail of a portfolio because it's idiosyncratic, it's uncorrelated. So if everything moves together and Bitcoin does something different, even if Bitcoin goes down when those things go up, it increases the Sharpe ratio of your portfolio because you have something that has a chance to do something different. So I actually like these periods where gold's going nuts and stocks are going nuts and Bitcoin's kind of going down or maybe sideways, and people are confused because if you really want to believe that it's uncorrelated, which is a benefit, it has to sometimes go down when other things go up. Right. And the funny thing is, when it all starts going up at the same time, again, people are going to start screaming about the correlation and act like this entire last year, when Bitcoin is effectively traded flat, didn't exist.
Bitcoin's when we think about sort of Bitcoin going to 1 million, your conversation with Michael Saylor on stage was pretty profound, and he said it right when the major institutions say, I think this is a good investment. It'll go up. Say, I'm just using an example, 1 million. When they say this is a great idea, it's at 10 million. So on the trajectory, what things in place, maybe not even just this cycle, but over the next decade, do you think that we'll need to see as a society for Bitcoin to go to $1 million and above?
Well, if Bitcoin's at $1 million, the question will be, what can you buy with $1 million? Right? Because I think that the denominator is really the key, and it's not necessarily the price of Bitcoin, but that debasement of the dollar that we're talking about. So if my groceries are like 20 grand, then $1 million Bitcoin is not that exciting. That said, that's not really my base case for how it gets there. But if it gets there in a short period of time, that will be the environment we're in. Like, Balaji had that bet. He was like, Bitcoin will be $1 million in 3 months. And I had him on and I asked him about it. He's like, I was burning $1 million just to like spark the debate on the debasement trade. Right. And which I wish I had $1 million to say stupid things. But if Bitcoin had gone to $1 million in 3 months, we would have been like full Mad Max, and you and I would have been like gathering the army to go to Gastown, right? And nobody wants to live in that dystopian
Armageddon.
world where Bitcoin gets to $1 million in a short period of time. So a slow grind up over many years, climbing a wall of worry, a 3x one couple years, and then it goes down a bit, and another 3x. You get there. And maybe it's in a normal world that Bitcoin is at $1 million. Also, if Bitcoin really fulfills the promise that many Bitcoiners believe in, I'm still kind of sidelined as to my strong opinions on this. But if it becomes the global reserve currency and everything is actually denominated in Bitcoin and things are transacting, it doesn't take hyperinflation to get there, right? It can just be adoption. But I don't see $1 million Bitcoin in the very near future, but I do see it eventually. But in the same way that, you could see a hell of a lot of tech stocks or real estate or things. I mean, look how much real estate went up in a 4 or 5 year period. It can be pretty crazy. If real estate can double in a few years, why can't Bitcoin go 9x in 10, 15, 20 years, right?
It's funny because I had on Mark Yusko probably about 2 years prior. Love that conversation. You had 2 Marks. I call it Mark Squared. You had 2 Marks this past week, and also Ran, which that was a great conversation. I enjoyed that one probably the most. I hope Mark's not offended. But Mark talked about, he goes, wait a minute, how do you take a home that's 500,000 and after COVID, because we talked after COVID, and that home is now, let's say, $750,000. Does the home perform any better? What is it doing that's so different that gives it this value? And I've even watched in our neighborhood home properties go up, and it's like, oh, I have X number of dollars. Okay, well then exactly where do you move? It reminds me of this book I'm reading right now. I'm looking to the right. It's called Snow Crash. It's about being in the metaverse, and it's just a really it's sort of like a crazy story, because you're right. If Bitcoin goes up that high, well, it's all relative to the cost of pizza, by the way, in the book, and relative to the cost of gas. You'll have to bring a gun with you in order to get gas to fill your car. I mean, that's not how I want to live.
The house point is a good one, because it's kind of like golden handcuffs, when you have a nice house. Like, there's a reason that nobody's particularly moving, because you're not going to give up your low mortgage payment for a high mortgage payment. And if you sell your formerly $1 million house for $3 million, if you want to live at the same level, you're going to pay $3 or $4 million for your next house. And net, you might as well just stay in your house because it's cheaper. Right. So the only way that the appreciation of a house really matters to someone when it's somewhat generational and the kids are gone and you're going to downsize. But if you want to maintain your same level of living, your house value going up with the whole market going up is basically pointless, unless you have some like unicorn that tripled while everything else doubled.
Yeah. No, I don't. Want to talk about quantum computing, right? Because we hear this and sort of like, I think it's a one way to try to shake people out of their bags. Quantum computing, I believe, is coming, from what I understand. From your knowledge and insight, where are we right now with quantum computing? How far is it away from actually affecting the ability for those to grab private keys and take your Bitcoin or your Ethereum or any other crypto for that matter?
So listen, I think quantum computing is a thing. I think that I've interviewed people much smarter than me on the matter, and I've gotten everything from 5 years to 50 years, right? So I can't give an educated opinion on when that actually happens. It will, but it kind of reminds me of Y2K or any of the big scares that we've had in the past, because we know that if it's going to be a threat, the people who have an incentive to protect the network or anything else against it are working equally hard, knowing that it's coming, to make sure that we are quantum proof and protected. So I have great faith in the white hats always to fight the black hats, right? And so if quantum is coming, I know there are many projects and many people looking to protect things. That said, I am way less worried about the Bitcoin network than I am about the nuclear codes and the Department of Defense website, and I don't know, all of the banking structures of the world, right? So like,
Yeah.
why that's an attack on like the Bitcoin network when it literally affects everything makes no sense to me. It is one of those just like nonsensical FUD things where you try to make a narrative out of something because
Right.
Bitcoin is digital. But like, I mean, do you think that like JP Morgan is in any better position to deal with quantum computing than the Bitcoin network? No,
No.
absolutely not. I would argue probably less because
Yeah.
of, the brilliance of people that are focusing on these things. Or like I said, the nuclear codes and the bases and literally the treasury, everything, right? We know how efficient the government is. So can you imagine that they're
Like a
prepared for this
surgeon.
any better than we are? No, right?
No, not even close. Operation Choke Point 2.0. What does that mean, and how might people find maybe their crypto access restricted? And I guess it goes back to the quantum computing question. But just when you think of Operation Choke Point 2.0, it kind of came across my desk. I'm like, oh, I'll ask Scott about this.
So I think it's largely ending. I definitely won't say over, but Operation Choke Point 2.0 was effectively the banking industry being disallowed from engaging with the crypto industry, debanking certain companies, debanking a lot of customers. I know plenty of individuals who had JP Morgan and such just closed an account because it got a, deposit from Coinbase or from some crypto exchange. And so there was this basically large scale attack by the Biden administration and bank regulators to make sure that the crypto industry had limited access to the banking system in the United States. Custodia Bank rejected for their master account by the Fed. Plenty of examples of this, basically endless examples of this, to be quite honest. And so obviously one of the main priorities of the Trump administration coming in was to immediately end Operation Choke Point 2.0, which they largely have, but we still do have reports of people being debanked and having issues with the banking system. The Fed has not completely come on board, although it seems to be happening slowly. Less of a concern at the moment, but I always remind people that the pendulum swings in both directions. So just because it's not happening now doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. I think that's why there's such like urgency about getting more clear legislation on the books because regulators change, they interpret the law differently. I mean, Gary Gensler and Paul Atkins are responding to the same laws as SEC commissioners, right? It's just how they choose to craft the regulation around those laws. So we need clear laws so that you can't have another Gary Gensler, right? And so I think the government shutdown and all these things have slowed some of the momentum, which really needs to get done before midterms, because inevitably at midterms the Republicans will probably lose their 3-branch mandate and have some issues legislating going forward.
And you also have, we talk about Waller and Powell, when they speak, the markets do react instantly. What kind of statements or actions could we actually see building long-term credibility in crypto? Because I think it's almost like there's this sort of runaway train where, think about decentralized finance, and you as a holder away from the government, you hold custody, care, and control. You are self-sovereign. What does that look like? What kind of statements could we see from the top down that would actually have a positive impact right now?
I still hate the Fed. So like
Me
it's
too.
kind of
Me
I
too.
like have this like problem with Bitcoin cognitive dissonance where we're like, yay, Fed, they said something good about our thing when it was literally created to be an answer to the Fed. But let's talk in the vacuum where on the real world where we don't have to hate the Fed, I guess. Powell's gone, right? He won't get fired, but he's gone. His term will end. So I think that he's been largely neutered. I think to your point that markets move when they talk is some of the like lowest level of human intellect, period. The guy sneezes in the wrong direction and the market moves, and the way he speaks and his tone and dovish and hawkish. I mean, the fact that global markets are watching for the tone in which somebody says something shows you how fundamentally broken markets are and how not free they are. That said, if we want to look at the positive side, Fed Governor Waller gave that incredible speech recently at their payments conference about crypto being interwoven into the very fabric of the American financial system and the Fed looking to the technology for payments. So listen, even if they hate the asset, even if they're dismissive of it, this is where they can't really debate the value of the technology because theirs is old, clunky, and expensive, and this is fast, cheap, and new. So crypto rails, blockchain rails are coming for everything. right? Because it's just a better technology. They're going to have to adopt it or die, right? And that's what we're seeing with Visa and MasterCard and the banks. They're all adopting stable coins or building their own layer ones or building their own rails because it's just faster and better than Swift or ACH, right? So I don't know that there's a clear signal we can get from the Fed that I would care about, because I just think having to listen to the Fed is so dumb. I think the entire structure is corrupt. I don't believe that a network of private bankers should be determining what happens with our money and monetary policy. So, like, anyone who does a deep dive on it, you start to, I think, fall very deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Makes a lot more sense. But for now, I think they're going to just be forced to slowly cut rates and adopt technology.
October 10th. I remember that day, like we say, it was like yesterday. All right. It was just last month. And, I would say day in crypto is sort of like a year in regular life. And I remember just watching everything just drop, drop, drop. And people were just getting liquidated, because if you're doing leverage trading, like that's not my area, right? I like to create content, research, build my crypto bags as I build them. Very conservative in that regard. But there were people taking major chances. What did you make of that day? And do you think there were some lessons that people who are immersed in this space can actually learn from that?
Yeah, stop using leverage, dumbass. Like, it's a pretty obvious lesson. Like, if you weren't leveraged on one of these exchanges, you still have your money.
Yeah.
It's a very obvious, right? And the most trusted institutions failed. So even if you used a stop loss and had properly managed risk, if the coin goes to zero and there's no buyer for the price that the exchange is forcing you to sell at, you get liquidated instead of a reasonable stop loss. So just don't do it and you'll be fine. $19 billion liquidated in one day from a bunch of altcoin positions that basically went to zero is just insane. If you're still touching that after all of this, then your brain is broken.
I asked a friend the question. I said, did you learn from this? And he goes, look, I'm a degen. And it goes back to your thing, right? When you first started your channel, you had 10,000 people. If you said something, no big deal. Now, when you speak at a million plus, it has a much different impact. It brings me to just ask this next question. Biden's administration, or the last administration, because I don't want to be too personal, depending on where people stand politically. I try to stay neutral, Scott. I try. The last administration laughed at at crypto. They just thought it was a joke. This administration fully embracing it, somewhat unpredictable. What do you think that this current administration needs to do over the next 3 years? If there's something that I'm not thinking of that could really propel us forward, is it regulations around how people can buy and sell their crypto? Is it the tax form that we're going to have to fill out at the end of the year? What is it?
I mean, I think that this administration has done effectively everything that it can to buoy crypto markets, right? And Interestingly, we had that massive sort of move when he was elected into the new year, but then it's been pretty sideways and down, at least for altcoins since then. So, I think at this point, there's been enough bluster and they've done most of the things that they promised that they would. So I think we just need to see legislation, but I don't know that there's a government catalyst short of an announcement that they bought Bitcoin for the balance sheet, like an actual strategic Bitcoin reserve with them buying Bitcoin. That would be a huge catalyst. But that said, it's all tailwinds from the government, and everything that they're doing, I think, will continue to push prices up and continue to push adoption and continue to open the doors for American institutions to use the technology and do all of these things. But I don't see a single catalyst beyond the strategic Bitcoin reserve at this point that would be a massive mover of price.
Agreed. And you had an incredible conversation with Michael Saylor on stage. I have to wonder, right? Because in the heart of you is a degen. You got involved. I remember I was watching the video, and anybody who hasn't, go to my page. Cointelegraph did a great video on you, and you had the binoculars. You remember it had the dollar signs in there, and I'd have to wonder, are there any? When I thought about my meme communities, and by the way, quick shout out to Wolf community and to Satoshi community. I like meme communities, and here's why I like them. It's not anything else other than I think it's a bigger bet on crypto in general. And if you have memes or altcoins, it really says to me that you have a bigger bet on whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin. You have your ordinals and you have your runes. So it's kind of a fun way to play around. But I would hope that you would collect or pick up the Bitcoin. And I think of things in sats. I also think of, when you pick up Ethereum, you don't have to pick up one Ethereum at a time if you can't. But what do you make of the community sentiment, everybody rallying around something to build value? And it seems to me like a lot of fun, but it's also a quick way, if you're not careful, to lose money. If you're not being smart and you're playing by the charts. But these days with your content now, behind the scenes, there's still some meme communities, altcoins, platforms, people, projects that you really, are digging?
Sure. So I have a lot of takes on that. I think if we're being honest, I think that's what Bitcoin was for probably the first 10 years, right? So like Bitcoin is the original meme coin. I don't say that in a negative way. I say it in sort of a positive way, right? But
No, it was.
as much as you can believe in the supply dynamics and digital gold and all of those things, it required a huge community that built and had a religious fervor about it to eventually bring it to a point where it was mainstream enough to become the narrative that people had kind of purported it to be, right? So that's true of a lot of assets, especially assets in crypto where there's no PE ratios or earnings or very obvious ways to value them like tech stocks or any other company. So that said, I think there's just way too many of them. I don't know how anyone chooses, and I just don't think that there's enough people to participate in any of them that they would gain real traction. And a community tied to a financial incentive is like a ticking time bomb, because then the thing goes down and the community leaves for the next thing that's not down, right? So like I think it's very hard to have a truly passionate community long term unless the value of the thing that they're rallying around, no matter how much they say they believe in it, continues to go up, right? So I think we saw this with thousands of NFT projects, right?
100%.
Like I am my lazy lion, he is my identity, and whatever. Then the lazy lion's worth nothing. Is that really your identity? No. So you move on to something else, right? And I think meme coins are, they're digital lottery tickets, which is fine if you know that it is that. But like, if you're a part of a community rallied around a token, don't do it because you think you're going to make money, because very low chance that you will. That's all I'll say. Like, if you have fun, like be in the community, do your thing, but like that is not an investment for your future.
No,
like putting money
I don't look.
What's
funny, Scott? I don't look at it as an investment. I think it's being part of something of the greater crypto ethos, and it's just a fun way. Because, for instance, I was looking back here, and I've got ENS Maxis. I remember when I was buying those things, $300-$400. They're not worth a whole lot right now. But for me, it's a great way that I'll be like to another participant. Remember when we got those? And it's a fun way to kind of talk about crypto and blockchain. And I feel like whether it's memes or alts or NFTs, it's a way to bring people around something greater. But if you're not collecting Ethereum right now, or you're not collecting Bitcoin over time, right? You're DCAing up or down, then you're just putting it on memes and alts. And that's that's where you're diversified into. I don't know. I think that's kind of foolish just in general. But I love the community and the participants. It's kind of like to the bigger part is that you want to see more people coming in. The problem is that they'll get burned if they don't do it correctly, which is most of the time if you're not smart about it. But it brings me to the thing about Coinbase. I actually ordered the Coinbase card. I've worked with CoinZoom in the past. Love CoinZoom. These are centralized exchanges. Do you think centralized exchanges that are U.S. regulated, that follow all the standards, do you believe that they bring credibility to the space?
Sure. Yeah, I absolutely think so. And well, until now, they had very low leverage, usually not available to Americans. And so that they didn't have the 100x YOLO of foreign exchanges. Although there's a report today that the CFTC is looking at adding more leverage to crypto exchanges within a month. So I guess we'll see if that behavior comes here. I would be very hard pressed to imagine that any American exchange will have more than 10x leverage, which is still relatively high. That said, I mean, Coinbase is custodying 9 of the Bitcoin spot ETFs, 7, 8, 9. I don't know the exact number at any given time. They're one of the, I think, best companies on the planet, and should be one of the largest 10 as crypto continues to gain more adoption. So I think they bring tremendous credibility. I mean, BlackRock is custodying, $100 billion in assets for their ETF with Coinbase.
Yep,
right?
And I've also
that's pretty credible.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I've also got the CoinZoom Visa debit card. They've got a nice partnership. They're a smaller centralized exchange, but I think they're going to have a seat at the table long term, and they're doing things right. Mark Yusko on your podcast discussed 4 ways governments handle debt. and I really enjoyed this part of how he made it. I'm curious to get your perspective. They either pay it off, they restructure, they default, or they devalue. What's your perspective on this?
I think it's accurate. I don't think that's particularly debatable. So I think we're just devaluing.
Okay.
That's the
All right.
debasement trade, right? So modern monetary theorists think that debt is basically a public good, that the government gives you services by having that debt, that the debt isn't real. That narrative is pretty much dead and dying at this point, right? But the problem is that neither party has any intention of addressing it. They'll say that it's a stupid theory, but they'll continue to balloon the debt, say we can grow our way out of it, print money, all of these things. I mean, it was supposed to be, and I've been saying this probably for 10 years, but it was supposed to be that the Republicans were fiscally responsible and the Democrats just wanted to spend meanwhile, $2,000 stimulus checks to every working American. Like, come on, right?
Yeah.
Pay the debt down. If you were an individual, like if the government was an individual, like you would have been, kicked out, put in jail, bankrupted, declared bankruptcy multiple times. Nobody would allow your debt to balloon like the United States government has. It wouldn't allow you to take out another credit card and run up the balance to the max. And that's what the United States government is doing at all times, right? So that debt's not going down. Like, I mean, we're going to give $2,000 to everybody and then use the rest to pay off the debt. What rest? Like, what are you talking
I don't see
about?
how that can happen. Oh, and then earlier in the year, of course, he said with Doge, 20%, taken from that, and there was a mic. This seems to be based on Trump's words that this is definitely coming down the pike. The question is how will that really impact us for the better? I'm curious. Maybe it makes me want to revisit, the whole Doge thing is, are the right programs being canceled out? But again, that goes down too far down the political avenue. So I want to be, a little careful on that. But I'm just wondering what's the long-term impact? And, when we think about institutional money is here right now more than ever before. How do we bring in the money from people who are everyday users? What is it going to take for somebody to get involved? Is it going centralized and buying the first piece of Bitcoin? What is it to get more people involved on the blockchain with actual crypto?
Wait, are you asking how to get more people to buy Bitcoin or how to get more people to actually use crypto technology? Because I think they're two different things.
How to get people to buy more Bitcoin? Let's start there.
I think people are buying more Bitcoin, right? So as they see institutions do it, you can see the flows of the ETFs. That's largely, retail investors buying it in their retirement accounts and such. So I think that that ship has sailed. That people are going to continue to buy as time goes on, right? And we know that nothing is better marketing for Bitcoin than higher Bitcoin prices. So when we do eventually break out and make new all-time highs, people are going to FOMO in and send it flying as they always have in the past. So I think Bitcoin has already reached exit velocity and just a matter of time. And as you hear the debasement trade and these narratives start to gain traction, I mean, well, I don't know. If you don't want to buy Bitcoin as a normal person who's not a Bitcoiner, when you hear JP Morgan and Citadel talking about the debasement trade and buy Bitcoin, and you hear Larry Fink literally out there like Satoshi Nakamoto every day, orange pilling the planet, and the president is pro Bitcoin. I mean, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
so
Larry
that's
Fink,
done. As far as getting people to use it, I don't know. Better UX, UI, and more adoption.
facts.
Yeah.
I mean, they put the phones in our hands. They call them smartphones. So it has to make it an easier way of access. And Larry Fink was talking at a conference. I don't know exactly where it was. He was talking about everything at this particular conference, but Bitcoin. Stable coins, obviously being, the heavy driver. What is the biggest blocker for banks accepting crypto as collateral? Is it regulation? Is it tech infrastructure? Is it risk models? Or is it all the above?
I think it's been Operation Choke Point 2.0. So if you take a look back at the Biden administration, there was something called SAB 121, which Hester Peirce and the SEC immediately overturned when Trump was elected and was inaugurated. And so there's some irony to SAB 121. So SAB 121 was basically a memo from the SEC. So it's not a law. It's not even a firm regulation. It was just something they wrote in a memo that said that anyone who wanted to custody crypto assets had to treat it as a liability on their balance sheet. So that means that like if BNY Mellon or State Street or one of the largest custodians on the planet wanted to have $100 billion in Bitcoin that they're holding for someone else, they had to somehow put $100 billion in cash on the other side of the balance sheet. Literally impossible. So the biggest custodians in the world were blocked from participating. That's how Coinbase ended up having all of the ETFs, because SAB 121 said that these legacy custodians couldn't. And so that had unintended consequences, which was that basically Coinbase in the crypto industry won on that, even though the opposite was the intention, right? They were trying to make it impossible. And what they did was make it impossible for their trusted Wall Street institutions to participate. So now that SAB 121 is overturned and they don't need to have assets to offset what were called liabilities, they're no longer liabilities. Now the course is basically clear for banks to custody these assets. And once they are custodying them, and once everybody's comfortable with that, and once they're in your Schwab portfolio or in your Morgan Stanley portfolio or Vanguard, which is even coming probably, then they're going to just start to be treated next to all of your other assets, and they're going to be obvious collateral for securities lending and all the other kind of borrowing that people do through their portfolios. But Bitcoin is the most pristine collateral in the world. And you can take a look at all of the Bitcoin native lending platforms, Abra and Ledin. There's a People's Reserve. There's a ton of these things. They've never really had issues because they over collateralize the loans. They have the Bitcoin, and the second you're in default, they start to liquidate your collateral and pay off the loans because Bitcoin is in their wallet. Like my first interview ever with Saylor was October, November 2020, right after he bought Bitcoin. And he broke this down for me. He was calling Bitcoin pristine collateral back then. He was like, I have 4 yachts. One of them can be parked halfway across the world, and I can get a loan against that thing. Good luck liquidating me with my yacht, right? What are you going to do? You're going to go get it, and then you're going to sell it? And like, no, you're just going to restructure my thing. I'm never going to get liquidated. Bitcoin is the ultimate collateral. Other crypto assets maybe should be way more over collateralized, I think we've learned, than even Bitcoin. But, they're doing like a 50% LTV on Bitcoin based loans, meaning that, if you have $1 million in Bitcoin, you can take a loan at 500 grand. And above that, you're starting to take tremendous risk. So you're looking at, needing massive moves on Bitcoin for people to get liquidated. As long as they over collateralize and do this in a smart manner, it's so easy and it just hums along. Like if you get liquidated like a dumbass, like they have your Bitcoin. So there's nothing you can do about it. It's sold, it's liquid 24/7, 365.
I got to go back and watch that interview, your first interview with Saylor after he
Me
did
too.
that. I believe I'd watched it before. And also you mentioned the SAD was at 2101.
SAB 121.
SAD 121. Thank you.
Yeah.
Don't worry, GPT would have corrected me on that.
SAB 121. Yeah,
SAB.
It was a huge part of Operation Choke Point 2.0.
Love it. Because again, as I started to hear about Choke Point, I was like, I know Scott's gonna have a little bit more about that. And then again, as you spoke about liability on the sheet, we talk about utility. We kept hearing this in the last run, right? Products and services connected. And I was like, okay. There was a company that came across my desk, was BZ, Pokemon. Now, mind you, bro, we're 48. I've never collected a Pokemon card in my life. I had friends that did, and really cool stuff. And I thought what was cool about the platform is that you can go on, you can pull this claw. It's true gambling, but the ratio of what you can lose is minimized, and then you can start building a collection. And by the way, you could win big, right? Gambling, it's exactly what it's supposed to be. And that's why I kind of love the community. Are there any platforms that you're noticing out there, RWA wise, that are just capturing attention, or is that something that you don't follow as closely?
I don't follow it so deeply. I mean, I think I just sort of track the tokenizing market as a whole, and like RWAs as a whole. I mean, Maple Finance is incredible, Ondo, a lot of these, but they're so far from kind of what you described. These are like guys who are tokenizing equities or doing these kind of giving liquidity for Bitcoin to the largest institutions in the back end. So like, I don't really have much insight, I think, on what's happening like with the consumer facing platforms on that. But I will say, when you have Larry Fink out there talking about tokenizing everything, that is inevitable and it's coming, right? And Polymarket is eating the world, and that, has a very strong crypto element to it. So I think there are some mainstream use cases here. Just not really my wheelhouse anymore.
So let me do this. Like, what, as we look to 2026, and because we're always thinking ahead, what narratives do you think will dominate tokenized assets, AI integration, gaming, RWAs, as you explained in your way, and layer two innovation? Where do you think we're going to go with that?
I think tokenizing real world assets will be the biggest narrative of 2026. As I think about that now, I haven't thought about it in general. So, good question. And now you're going to make me eat my words if I'm wrong, but I'm going to have to think
No,
about it. No, but I think I just think it's going to be the continued institutionalization of our asset class, right? And so all of the institutional use cases are largely the things that are going to catch the most traction. Like, sadly, like, what does JP Morgan want to do with crypto? What does Larry Fink and BlackRock want to do with crypto? Those things are likely going to lead. Gaming, I thought, actually would have had a huge move by now. Like, Gunzilla was a legit AAA game and launched a token. It's been down only, unfortunately. I'm sure I'm wildly underwater on that. Like, I invested in that, and so I don't even look at my portfolio. I don't even have a portfolio tracker.
no,
It's
I
one of
know, because that
my
happened.
greatest life
You
hacks.
after FTX, you said, and I think for the sanity, I watched that and I thought about it. I was like, oh man, I need to follow what Scott did on that. That
Yeah, what's the
because you don't
point?
look at it anymore. Why?
They're
What?
down. They're down, and I'm not selling them here, so whatever.
Right.
But I thought gaming would really catch a bid by now,
Yeah.
and it hasn't. So maybe I'll be surprised. I do think that, to your point, the intersection of AI and crypto will be huge, but I'm not sure if we'll capture that on the token side. I think that's being captured right now in miners, right? I mean, that's why we've seen Iron go from $2 to $70 and Cypher and all these things pumping, because they can just click a switch and all of a sudden they're AI data centers instead of Bitcoin miners, right? So I don't have a strong thesis on any part of the market outside of the majors that get a treasury company and an ETF and some institutional involvement. Like, I would be very focused and consolidated at the top, and place very small bets on everything else if you really believe in it.
In preparing for you to come on, 2 weeks ago, I was like, reached out to you. I was like, hey, would you come on? Absolutely. And I said, all right, let me subscribe to the Wolf Den. I've seen the newsletter, and I've read probably, I don't know, I'd say probably 15 of them, and they're great. They're super comprehensive. And I think I know the answer to this question because I found it this morning, but I wanted you to answer it. And I kind of like the answer if it ends up this way. What does someone get with the free version versus the paid version?
Okay, so there is no paid version, which is confusing, but it's a free newsletter. And I actually wrote a big post on this. Substack won't support a free newsletter. We learned this after years with Substack. I was originally on Review, but they were bought by Twitter, and then Elon Musk bought Twitter and got rid of Review.
Elon.
So Review, you could just promote it on Twitter because it was part of it, and you would continue to grow and grow and grow. It wasn't considered an outside link before Elon Musk had the war on outside links, and particularly on Substack. So Elon Musk basically went to war with Substack, and you get penalized for publishing Substack links on X. Still, 3 years later, however long he's been doing it, right? So recently, I think the floor is $5 to subscribe paid. We were trying to make it like 1 cent, and they wouldn't let us. But we wrote a whole post: don't subscribe, don't pay, like, do not. So there might be a few people who did. We've tried to reach out, but if we show that it's a paid, like, literally click the switch, then Substack starts to actually put it into their engine for growth and to show it to people and things like that, just by it being paid. So there is no difference. It's free 5 days a week. And if you are paying for it, call me up on accident, call me up and we'll refund you.
Well, you know what the funny part about it was is when I saw it, I saw that the you could pay, it was $5, and I was like, oh, that's to support his channel. I love it. Let me just say, if you came on here and like, Craig, this was a crappy conversation, you really stink, you should stop this right now, I'm going to tell you, I would still read your letter every single day. After 15 days of reading it, I freaking love it. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. I mean, that writing that newsletter every day at 5 o'clock in the morning is what preps me for the rest of day of content and conversations like this, so that I can just show up and be ready, right? Because I have to kind of hold myself accountable in the morning, which for me is more important than even who reads it. It's just the exercise of prepping for the day that basically is writing the newsletter.
This actually goes to the next question, and I didn't even know I was going to have it. You actually posted this about 15 minutes before we came on. Strong opinions loosely held. The highest signs of intelligence is someone's willingness to possess new information objectively and change their view when necessary. Unwavering dogma that never changes about any asset, team, or tribe is likely not a result of deep thought. So, my question for you is who or what, I don't say who, has had the greatest impact on you? And let's just say for this year in 2025, when you're looking back, kind of taking inventory of everything, who is that one person, or maybe it's a couple?
Watching what Saylor's done has been incredible to me. And I know that he's pissed a lot of people off, and there's some like bifurcation in the Bitcoin maxi community and on Wall Street because, you know, he tapped the ATM below the NAV that he talked about and kind of pissed people off. But watching Michael Saylor continue to find new and innovative ways to create products that are backed by Bitcoin and also to unlock capital that struggles to find a way to gain some sort of superficial access to Bitcoin, I think has been still the biggest mover for me. He would probably be the answer on many years. And listen, I don't like love everything that they do. I think there's some risk associated with what he's doing, but to be that far out in the lead and to continue to kind of drive it home, I think it's just incredibly inspiring. And because we have a personal relationship and like prepping to whatever you call prepping, but like he broke down like this long slide deck for me on Friday before we did the conversation on Monday. He said, and we were like, what should we talk about? Like, this is a TradFi conversation, it's not a Bitcoin conversation. He says, I don't really want to talk about Bitcoin much, and I definitely don't want to talk about like MicroStrategy or strategy stock. I want to talk about like other ways to bring people kind of into the fold. And we kind of broke down STRC and STRD and STRK and all these things. Just seeing that dude's brain work, man, it is another level of brilliance and understanding of the market. So, I think watching these guys really lead from the front, the sailors of the world, like that's kind of, I think, gives us a very good idea of where this industry is headed. It's not going to be led by, anonymous avatars on X anymore, who tell you to buy their thing. It's this is very, very grown up big boy stuff now.
Well, speaking of big boy grown up stuff, man, you've got a freaking sense of humor. I love how James Wynn came at you and he said, you look panicked. And you said, breaking, man discovers ADHD. I freaking love it. What a great way to wonderfully troll back.
It wasn't even a troll. It's just like, it's so dumb. It's just so stupid. Like, he's obviously like trying to, I guess, bait me for engagement, which occasionally works for people, right? Because
this is great. I mean, I
like to debate with people. It's fun. Right. I've taken my shots at him, but only because like on a Sunday calling for Black Monday when you're too dumb to know what Black Monday is hilarious. Like saying tomorrow will be Black Monday for stocks is like saying the Dow is going to go down 20% tomorrow, because Black Monday is an actual thing. It's not just an idea. Right. And so listen, I'm looking at 3 screens right now.
You look worried.
I look exactly the same as I did on that, which is extremely panicked. My eyes are going back and forth because like my wife texted me over here while we've been talking. I was asked to go be on Schwab at 3:25 today to talk about Donald Trump having crypto-backed mortgages, which apparently happened in like the last hour.
Crypto-backed
I have ADHD, wow. And I am somewhat. I can keep, and every show I'm doing 4 other things. That is who I am.
What a great career.
So when I get into my new studio and I don't like, my phone's not going to ring on the computer and stuff, and I'm not going to have screens, it's going to be very interesting to see what I can pull off when I'm actually super focused. No, I think it'll be great. Yeah, I mean, he's like, his eyes are darting around. He's looking down. He's like, dude, I got dry lips. I lick my lips all the time. Like my eyes dart around all the time. He's like, he's got bags under his eyes. I'm like, I've had those since I was like 3 months old or something, right? I mean, like you can look at my baby pictures. I have the same bags. They're not like a sign of the lack of sleep I got because I'm so stressed. Yeah, dude. I mean, I love like, because I have zero emotion about like strangers on the internet. Like I find it I think X is like the worst cesspool on earth, like all social media. So I use it for like pure signal and entertainment. I was just like, I will just tweet shit to see how depressed or excited the market is by like the community is just by how angry their tweets are. Like I will purposely trigger to some degree, knowing I'm not trying to make anyone mad, but I will say something that's on the edge to see how close we are to that edge, you know?
But I think it's like signal to noise ratio. I'm reading another book. It sounds crazy. I don't, you know what's funny? I was never a voracious reader until maybe about a year ago, until I'm like, I want to get smart. You know, I have average intelligence. And it was funny. We're talking about like real focus. So it's not about the amount of time because everybody's always multitasking. And I love the fact, I love your new studio, by the way. I saw the pictures. That's
Dude, I
freaking
can't
flex.
wait. We can't
You've
get
earned
internet.
it.
It's been 5 weeks trying to get internet into a commercial office building, and like the internet company that's
Yeah.
commercial stuff, they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be 3 months. They're like,
But
it's
you've
in
earned it.
every
Yeah.
room around this room. Yeah.
But you've earned it. You deserve it. You've earned it, and you continue to propel this space forward in such a meaningful way. And again, that's why people tune into you, and that's why I said I'm going to keep reading the newsletter. Talk to me a little bit about Crypto Town Hall, and then I just want to dive in a little bit on Sailor.
Crypto Town Hall every day, 10:15 a.m. every weekday on X. It's hosted by myself and Dave Weisberger. It was originally myself, Mario Knopfel, and Rand Nooner, but they've just like moved on to other things. Like, well, it's Rand's only time with his kids, so we totally understood. And Mario just does politics now, right? He's not involved in crypto at all. But it's a conversation. We've all done Twitter Spaces, so 5 to 10 people any given day. You're there often. Just kind of chopping it up and breaking down the topics of the day. Now, it used to be more news driven. Now it's just like we just get to talk and it goes wherever it goes. Right. So it's an interesting conversation, but a lot of fun to gather, 4,000 or 5,000 people together to have a conversation every day.
Yep. And I want to thank, by the way, 280 people in the room. Thank you so much. I'm appreciating you being here and giving of your time and tuning in some good information with you, Scott. When we think about Sailor, right? If you're going to get rich on Bitcoin, and I love this, you're going to need the courage. How much of Sailor's digital capital thesis is already priced in versus still being underappreciated?
I think it's wildly underappreciated. So I think that as we move into a world where yields continuously come down because we're going to go into a ZERP environment and they're going to cut rates. Right now, what are you getting in, 3 to 5% in treasuries, depending on the duration, 4 or 5%. What happens when that goes back to being 1 or 2 or 3%? He's got these products sitting there where you can earn 10%. And when you adjust it for taxes because of the structure of it, it's really like 17% is what you're earning on a yearly basis because you don't have to pay the taxes on the gains from that. So, I mean, it's just a no-brainer. And you have to believe in Bitcoin, of course, to some degree, although I don't think the market really cares much about that. But a relatively safe 10% plus yield in an environment that's yields are dropping is just going to become an easier and easier and easier sell. That was the most popular IPO of the year. I mean, it was oversubscribed, more than 2 billion, maybe $3 billion. I mean, wild, STRC. And it, like, how can you not want 10% yield when the risk-free rate is 2 or 3?
For you, and I'm gonna say for your newsletter, for Macro Mondays, for your daily content, how do you decide or how do you narrow into what it is that you're going to talk about? Can I assume that a lot of the content is centered around Bitcoin adoption? I want to say Bitcoin adoption, but Bitcoin in general. How is it going to relate to the macro market along with the government? Like, how do you decide what's making it onto either a show or into your newsletter?
Whim.
I'll take whim. I love it.
Like I said, I kind of wake up and I just see what's hot at the moment on YouTube now. Like the algo just loves Bitcoin macro kind of crossover stuff. Macro Monday is my most popular show. Those are the conversations I have when I go to conferences now. Like my fans are all guys like us. They're 40 somethings with kids who they're not 20-year-old traders anymore, which is kind of where I started. So I think that's where the puck is moving and I got to skate there. So, I think that right now my heavily Bitcoin focused with a bit of Web3 and, crypto as well. And maybe that's been a switch over the years and definitely heavily focused on where macro and Bitcoin meet, and so that's kind of always the overarching theme in my mind is how do we get the mainstream retail investor into this thing?
Well, look, we've got a good group of people in here. If you're not following Scott, which I assume that you are, I would have to assume. I know that there are people in here that, but I think more importantly, go just subscribe to that newsletter, and it's free. And don't pay for the subscribe version because there's no subscribership. If Saylor's $10 million vision of a Bitcoin pays out, how does this affect Wall Street? You know how it affects the regular streets if this happened overnight. I'll come and protect you guys to get the can of gas so you can get in your car. But like, what does that look like for Wall Street? How is this going to adversely affect our markets over the next years to come?
I think that $10 million Bitcoin only happens if it's been widely adopted by all of those institutions. So I think they'll be operating on blockchain rails, as we talked about before. I think every company will be a Bitcoin treasury company, right? And I don't mean that they'll be financially engineering their balance sheet to find ways to buy Bitcoin. I mean that they will all own Bitcoin, because to get to $10 million, they're all going to have to be buying Bitcoin, right? Every one of these institutions, it's got to become the cash replacement on their balance sheet. And so I think that it will positively affect us, and it will probably positively affect Wall Street, right? Because they'll have adopted an asset that went to $10 million. So if we get to that point, I think almost everyone will have benefited from it, because it will be so mainstream that it will touch everyone's portfolio and lives.
I hope so. I hope so. And when we think about it, and I didn't even have this out prepped, but when we think about the different blockchains, we've got Ethereum. It has a reason. I like MVX, which is EGLD. I like that blockchain. Again, there's social currency tokenomics.
Dude, I was one of the first Elrond bulls when I was trading that against Bitcoin and Sats. Like, actually trading Elrond. Sorry to interrupt you, but
you're good. No,
one of the things that gave me my biggest audience, because it was like a 50 or 100 or 200x, and then sold it, a lot of it, and then did it again when it went back to like $10 as e-gold, and then went all the way up to the hundreds or whatever it was. I've known Benjamin, those guys, for a very long time, so I think they have incredible tech, and they've done a lot of rebranding, which I find a bit confusing. But
yeah. We actually, funny enough, and I'll you can find it on my YouTube. I actually interviewed Benjamin in this past July. So that was a really interesting conversation. Very strong, solid community. I like their user interface, but again, it's how do you bring it out to more people? There's not enough Americans on that, but that's really interesting. Yeah, and right now I think it's hovering somewhere around $10 per token. It was as high as 500. But that's cool backstory to hear from you. What's probably two things that you've heard from Saylor directly where you're like, this is something I could share publicly that might give people a different perspective who are listening in today on how they should have a long-term forecast? Because I think when it comes to buying Bitcoin, I think of things in sats. So if it's $25 or it's 500, doesn't matter. I'm acquiring more sats. And that is my long-term thesis. And the courage to do that and to take that action is important. What are a couple things that maybe have a mindset shift or could have an impact on the community who's listening today?
I'm not sure I have any inside baseball on him particularly, because I think he's pretty transparent and says everything out loud. Like, there's no quiet parts with him, right? But I think watching his level of conviction and the way he thinks about building new products and bringing new people in is all the insight that you need, right? I mean, he deeply believes that this asset class is going to those levels, and he deeply believes that we will have the full suite of financial services on Bitcoin that we do on everything else, and it won't just be him who builds it. And I think we're seeing that in real time with all these institutions I've mentioned 100 times, right? I mean, everybody is adopting it. I also think it's very interesting that he has changed his tune a lot on altcoins. He talks now about Ethereum and proof of stake and tokenizing things. Those were not things that Maxi Saylor would have discussed over the years. So I think we're seeing him evolve in real time, strong opinions loosely held, and understand where the market is going. And I think it's just a signal of his brilliance. And if he's seeing it, I think everybody should see it, even the most kind of ardent Bitcoin maxis.
All right, just a couple more questions as we're wrapping up, because I want you to get onto that call on time. You have a round table, and you've got all of these different blockchains. You have Ethereum, you have Bitcoin, of course, right? Started a meme coin. Laszlo Hanya actually did a video on that 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas, 2 large pies nonetheless. Maybe Eagle.
Large.
Maybe Eagle, super large, duper duper large. What other do you think that a lot of the top 10 cryptos, aside from the stables, that we get to see them at the table and that they all have a functionality and a use over the next 5 to 10?
No.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of new competition. I think they're getting faster and cheaper. And I think if you haven't caught a very specific use case, that you might slowly dwindle into oblivion with time. I'm not saying specifically any of the ones that you mentioned, but like,
Yeah.
unless they can become like the NFT chain or the gaming chain or the something, like, I don't think a lot of these smaller layer ones are going to have much interest as we see the new ones and the ones that have already kind of, hit exit velocity continue. Like, I would say Ethereum right now, I dollar cost average into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, and I don't really overthink it.
Yeah.
Right. I think you could speculate on these, like the monads or all these new ones, Mega ETH. I don't know any of this stuff, but like Barachain was heavily hyped. I think that went all the way down. Like, I have no idea. Right. But like, I think you're going to have to be very concentrated and smart with your bets. I mean, you got to remember, a lot of these people have been working on this stuff for 7 or 8 years. Like, if there's not meaningful adoption in TVL, you could be in a lot of trouble. Like,
Correct.
I've had Aptos working with for almost a year now. Like, they're the third chain by stablecoins. So I find that really, really interesting when you take a look after Ethereum and Solana. If you're not really fast and cheap, and like, if you're like CEO or founder, which is so funny in decentralized world, is not like on Capitol Hill or meeting with BlackRock, you might be in trouble. I'm sorry, I hate to say it. That's not what I want, but I think that's where we're at.
But it's good to have that perspective, because then other people hear it from your end, because you're talking to people all the time. And again, Ran was probably my favorite conversation, because when I'm folding the laundry, or if I'm just relaxing at night after the kids have gone to bed, I'm catching up on different podcasts. I'm listening in on spaces intently, so that way I can have meaningful dialogue with fairly intelligent people. So I'm so appreciative that you came on to the stream today and that we got to have a meaningful conversation. I appreciate you giving of your time, and I look forward to staying connected, and anything that we can do from our end to support what you're doing, we're always here.
Really appreciate that, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This was a great conversation. I can't believe we just passed an hour that quickly. That was great.
Man, I appreciate that. I'm going to end the stream. I appreciate you guys for tuning in.
Thank you, guys.